Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to go deep again.
Always. What fascinating corner of history are we diving into today?
Well, today we're heading back to ancient China. We're going to be looking at Confucius,
Oh, interesting. What about Confucius are we focusing on?
specifically his return to his home state of Lu.
Ah, after his years of exile. That's a pretty pivotal moment in his life, right?
Definitely. And we've got some really interesting sources about this period.
I'm all ears. What kind of sources are we talking about?
We've got some historical records and anecdotes that give us a glimpse into what was going on in Lu when Confucius returned and how he navigated the whole situation.
That sounds intriguing. So what's the mission of this deep dive? What are we hoping to uncover?
I think the big question here is, how did Confucius, who was a big advocate for tradition and proper conduct, deal with the fact that Lu had completely transformed in his absence?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's like coming home after a long trip and finding that everything you knew has been totally rearranged.
Exactly. So let's get into it. Paint us a picture. What was the situation in Lu when Confucius finally returned?
Well, during his exile, the balance of power had seriously shifted. We're talking big time changes.
Okay, in what way?
You see, these families, the Sunhan, they were like these powerful oligarchs. During Confucius's exile, they had really consolidated their control over the state,
So they'd kind of taken over while he was away?
basically. And this was a huge departure from the traditional power structure, the way things were supposed to be in Confucius's eyes.
Got it. And he was not a fan of this, right? I mean, he opposed these families before he left.
Oh yeah, he definitely did, which makes his return even more interesting, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. So he comes back to Lu, and it's now ruled by the very people he disagreed with. Talk about awkward.
Right, it's like walking into a lion's den.
Totally. So what does he do? Does he challenge them? Does he protest?
Well, surprisingly, he doesn't go for an all-out confrontation. Confucius was a very subtle guy. Instead, he chose a more nuanced path.
Nuance, that's not usually the first word that comes to mind when you think of ancient power
It's
struggles.
true, but Confucius was a master of it. He found this delicate balance. Publicly, he acknowledged the Sun Quan's authority, but at the same time, he used all these subtle messages to signal how he really felt.
Wow, that sounds super tricky, like playing 4D chess or something. How did he pull that off?
Well, Confucius was a master of using history to make a point. He started highlighting the story of Boyi and Shuki to his students and everyone who would listen.
Boyi and Shuki. Remind me who they were again?
They were these two brothers, aristocrats from the Shang dynasty. They were known for their unwavering principles. When the Shang dynasty was overthrown by the Zhou, they flat out refused to eat Zhou grain.
Really, why?
They saw the Zhou dynasty as illegitimate, so they basically saw eating their food as a betrayal of their principles. They actually chose to starve to death rather than compromise.
Wow, talk about taking a stand. But how does this relate to Confucius and the whole San Juan situation? Was he subtly suggesting a mass hunger strike?
Haha, no, not quite. Confucius focused on a particular aspect of their story, their lack of resentment. He really emphasized how they let go of the past, sought a peaceful resolution, even if it meant, well.
Yeah, even if it meant the ultimate sacrifice. So what was he getting at?
Well, it was a clever way to draw a parallel. He was basically saying, look, things change, regimes change, but we can't stay stuck in the past. We need to find a way to move forward peacefully.
I see. I see. It's like he's subtly acknowledging the new reality while still holding on to his ideals.
Precisely. And the really interesting part is how he drew parallels between the Zhou overthrowing the Shang and the Sun Quan taking over Lu. He's not directly saying it, but the implication is there.
Right, like he's acknowledging the Sun Wan's Ru without actually saying, hey, you guys were totally right.
Exactly. It's brilliant, really. And his messaging went even deeper than that.
Deeper. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, he also started drawing comparisons between Duke Zhao of Lu, the ruler who was essentially pushed out by the Sun Quan, and the tyrannical King Zhu of Shang.
Okay, wait, so who's Duke Xiao in all of this?
Duke Zhao was the ruler of Lu before the Senhan consolidated their power. He represented the old order, the way things were supposed to be according to Confucius.
Got it. So by comparing Duke Xiao to the tyrannical King Zhu, was Confucius kind of throwing shade at the Senhan?
You could definitely see it that way. He was basically saying, hey, remember that terrible king everyone hated? Well, the guy you replaced was kind of like him, so maybe think about that.
Wow, that's some serious subtext. He's walking a very fine line here. So the Sanhuan must have picked up on this, right?
We can only speculate on how they interpreted it, but it's clear Confucius was playing a very intricate game.
Yeah, he's not just going along with the new status quo. He's subtly pushing back, making his opinions known. But it wasn't just words, right? Didn't he also take some actions that showed his true allegiance?
You are absolutely correct. Confucius wasn't just all talk. He took some pretty significant actions, even years after Duke Xiao's death.
Okay, spill the tea. What did he do?
Well, for one, he made sure that Duke Zhao received all the proper burial rites.
Which was a big deal back then, right?
Huge deal. It was a way of showing respect, honoring the legacy of the deceased, and in a way, it was a subtle challenge to the San Juan's authority.
Right. It's like he's saying, I still recognize this guy as the legitimate ruler, even if you guys are in charge now.
Exactly. And that wasn't all. He made another decision that really showed where his loyalties lay.
I'm on the edge of my seat. Tell me, tell me.
A few years after Duke Xiao died, his wife passed away. Now, their marriage had been pretty controversial. There were a lot of rumors and wilders surrounding it.
Ooh, juicy. What kind of rumors?
Well, it was seen as a sign of Duke Zhao's weakness. People questioned his judgment, said he was easily manipulated. Attending her funeral was a risky move for Confucius, especially with the Sun Quan in power.
How so?
Well, remember, the Sun Han benefited from Duke Zhao's downfall. By attending the funeral of his controversial wife, Confucius was potentially stirring up old resentments, reminding people of the duke's perceived flaws.
And that could have made the San Juan very unhappy.
Exactly, but Confucius went anyway. He knew it was a risky move, but he did it anyway. It was a powerful statement.
Wow. So he's basically saying, I'm not afraid of you guys. I'm going to honor the memory of Duke Xiao and his family, even if you don't like it.
That's a great way to put it. It shows his incredible courage and his unwavering loyalty to his principles.
He's not backing down, even in the face of this new power structure. It's a really inspiring story, actually.
It is, and it speaks to a universal dilemma, doesn't it? How do you stay true to yourself when the world around you is changing, when the people in power might not share your values?
That's a great point. It's a question we all face in different ways, even today.
Absolutely. And Confucius's story shows that there's no easy answer. It's a constant balancing act.
Right. It's about finding a way to navigate a complex world without compromising your integrity.
Exactly. And that's where the story takes an even more fascinating turn, because now a new player enters the scene, Yang Hu.
Ah, Yang Hu. I've heard that name. He and Confucius didn't exactly see eye to eye.
Not at all. And his arrival really shakes things up in Lu.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me everything. Who is this Yang Hu and how does he fit into all of this? Yang Hu, this ambitious guy who basically took control of Lu, he invites Confucius to join his government.
It is a pretty dramatic turn of events, right?
Yeah, totally. You've got these two strong personalities representing completely opposite ideas about leadership and power, and now they're suddenly face to face.
It's like a clash of the titans.
Right, and it makes you wonder what was going through Confucius's mind. Here he is, carefully crafting this message, using history and tradition to navigate a really tricky situation, and then boom, he's hit with this direct challenge.
Join the system or risk making a powerful enemy. It's a tough spot to be in.
For sure. So what does he do? Does he see this as an opportunity to maybe influence things from the inside?
Well, his first reaction is anything but straightforward. He actually tries to avoid Yang Hu.
Avoid him, really?
Yeah, it's almost comical. He even goes to visit Yang Hu's house when he knows he's not home.
So he's not exactly jumping at the chance to work with this guy.
Not at all. It's like he's trying to politely decline the offer without actually saying no.
That's so Confucius. Always finding a way to express his opinion without directly challenging authority. But you can't avoid someone forever, right?
Nope. Fate, or maybe just Yang Hu's persistence, intervened. They end up bumping into each other, right there on the street. And Yang Hu doesn't miss a beat.
He seizes the moment.
Oh yeah, he makes his pitch, he appeals to Confucius's sense of duty, his desire to serve the state.
So he's playing the you can really make a difference card.
Exactly. He's like, look, you've got the wisdom, the experience, why not use it to help me govern?
It's a pretty persuasive argument, even if it's coming from someone whose methods Confucius really opposed.
It is, and it shows that Yang Hu recognized the value of having Confucius on his side, even if he didn't agree with all his traditionalist ideas.
It's like he knew that having Confucius on board would lend him a legitimacy that he couldn't get just from military victories?
Exactly. Yang Hu understood the power of symbolism.
Okay, so what does Confucius do? Does he give in?
This is where it gets even more interesting. He actually agrees. He gives Yang Hu his word, right there on the street, that he'll join the government.
He agrees. Wait, really? I thought he's trying to avoid this guy.
I know, right? It's a total surprise. But here's the catch, he never actually follows through.
Wait, he agrees and then does nothing. What's going on here?
It's a moment that has puzzled scholars for centuries. Some think it was a calculated move, like a way to appease Yang Hu without actually compromising his principles.
Sort of like, yeah, I'll get right on that. Just, visit right now.
Exactly. Others see it as a sign of genuine internal conflict. Like maybe for a moment, Confucius really considered working with Yang Hu, but then ultimately decided against it.
So he's torn between his desire to serve his state and his belief that true leadership has to be based on virtue, not just power.
Yeah, it's a tough call, and it's a dilemma that we still face today, right? Do we compromise our ideas for a chance to make a difference? Or do we stick to our principles, even if it means missing an opportunity?
That's a big question, and Confucius's story doesn't really give us a clear-cut answer.
No, it doesn't, but it does show how complex these situations can be, and how difficult it is to navigate a world where power and morality don't always align.
Absolutely. And it raises another big question, too. How do we define success? Is it achieving concrete results, even if it means compromise? Or is it staying true to your values, even if it means not getting what you want?
Those are tough questions to grapple with, and I think Confucius's story reminds us that there's not always a simple answer.
So we've got Confucius navigating this new reality, dealing with the Sen Han families, and now we've got this whole Yang Hu saga. But didn't you say that Yang Hu's rule didn't last that long?
Ah, yes. That's right. Even the most cunning strategists can be undone by unforeseen circumstances.
So what happened? Did he finally get what was coming to him?
Well, it's not quite the dramatic downfall you might expect, and it all comes down to a change in the very circumstances that brought Yang Hu to power in the first place.
Okay, now I'm really curious. You're going to have to tell us all about it.
I will, but that's a story for our next deep dive.
All right, we're back, ready to finally find out what happened to Yang Hu.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating twist in the story, and I think it reveals a lot about Confucius's philosophy, too.
Okay, remind me. We left off with Yang Hu firmly in control of Lu, even after trying to bring Confucius into his government.
That's right. And remember, Confucius had predicted that Yang Hu's rule wouldn't last, but for very different reasons than what actually happened.
You mentioned it wasn't some big dramatic downfall or anything like that. So what caused his power to crumble?
Well, think back to how Yang Hu rose to prominence in the first place. It was through his military victories, right? Especially in Lu's conflicts with the neighboring state of Qi.
Yeah, he was basically the war hero. That's what gave him the leverage to outmaneuver the Sun Huan families.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Lu and Qi eventually negotiated a peace treaty.
Wait, so the wars that fueled his rise to power just stopped?
Yep, the very foundation of his authority suddenly became irrelevant.
Wow, that's wild. So what happened to Yang Hu when there was no more war to fight?
Well, without the constant threat from Qi, his influence started to fade. He wasn't the indispensable figure he once was. And the Sun Wan families, they saw their chance.
To take back control. I bet they weren't too sad to see Yang Hu lose his grip on power.
You got it. They orchestrated a political coup and forced Yang Hu into exile.
And just like that, the guy who seemed untouchable was gone.
It's a powerful reminder that even the most carefully constructed power can be fleeting, especially when circumstances change so drastically.
It's kind of poetic, isn't it? The very thing that brought Yang Hu to power ultimately led to his downfall.
For sure. But what about Confucius during all of this? Where does he fit into Yang Hu's downfall?
Yeah, good point. What was his reaction to all these sudden shifts in power?
Well, there's no evidence that he was directly involved in Yang Hu's downfall. Remember, he had chosen to focus on teaching and scholarship?
Right, he was shaping future generations, not plotting political maneuvers. But he must have had some thoughts on it all.
Oh, definitely. Even though Yang Hu's rule ended for completely different reasons than he expected, I think Confucius saw it as a validation of his worldview.
How so?
Well, Confucius always believed that true power, lasting power, doesn't come from military might or cutting strategy. It comes from cultivating virtue and moral leadership.
So Yang Hu's downfall, even if it was brought about by this random peace treaty, still kind of proves his point.
Exactly. It shows that power gained through force or ambition is often temporary and unstable, whereas a society guided by moral principles is more likely to endure.
It's a pretty timeless lesson, isn't it? No matter how much power someone has, it's their character and their commitment to what's right that really matters.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the most enduring aspects of Confucius's legacy. His teachings emphasize that a just and harmonious society starts with each individual striving to be their best selves.
It's a powerful message, and it's really relevant even today.
Totally agree. We might not all be facing ancient power struggles, but we all have to make choices about how we use our own influence and navigate a world where things are constantly changing.
So what's the big takeaway you hope people get from this whole deep dive? What's the one thing you really want them to remember?
I think it's this. While we might not always be able to control the circumstances we face, we can control how we respond to them. Confucius showed us that even in the midst of chaos and political upheaval, we can choose to focus on cultivating virtue and wisdom, both of ourselves and in others. That's where true and lasting change begins.
Beautifully said. It's been a fascinating journey exploring Confucius's life and his impact on the world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure. And to everyone listening, keep exploring these stories from the past. You never know what insights you might uncover.
That's right. Until next time, happy deep diving.